You're listening to How to Drink Less, and I'm your host, Adriana Cloud. Whether your goal is to cut back, take a break, or say goodbye to alcohol for good, this podcast will help you stop drinking on autopilot, learn how to manage cravings, and feel fully in control around alcohol. It's easier than you think. Listen on to find out how. Hey everyone! Thank you for joining me for another episode. Today I have something controversial I want to talk to you about. So, what I'm about to say might be frustrating or annoying to hear, but I hope that you'll stick with me and give me the benefit of the doubt as I try to explain what I mean. So, here it goes. The hardest part of changing your drinking habit is not saying no to alcohol. Saying no is actually the easy part. I know, that might sound ridiculous to you, but I'll prove to you that that's not the hard part. What is actually hard is learning to sit with yourself and all of your emotions without the buffer of alcohol. Getting comfortable with the discomfort of being fully present in your life, that's what's actually hard about drinking less or quitting drinking. Now, I'll be the first to say that back when I was trying to manage my drinking, if someone had told me that not drinking would be the easy part, I would have not only rolled my eyes, but I probably would have secretly imagined giving them a good kick in the shins. Because, duh, I had all the evidence that it was so hard not to drink. Every day, I would promise myself that I would drink less, or stop at one drink, or if I was feeling particularly optimistic, that I wasn't going to drink at all that day. And come evening, I would crumble and break that promise. Obviously, it was hard not to drink. I had so much proof that it was really hard, because if it were easy, I would have managed it. So, if this is where you are today as well, and you're more than a little skeptical of these claims I'm making, I hear you. But please let me explain what I mean. First of all, let's address the fact that you do know very well how to say no to a drink. You do it all the time. I'm going to make some assumptions here, but you probably don't drink while you're brushing your teeth or tying your shoelaces. You probably don't drink when you're in a work meeting, or at least in some meetings. I'm going to guess that you don't drink. You probably don't drink in line at the post office or while you're picking up prescriptions from the pharmacy. These might seem like silly examples, but the point I want to make is that you're not drinking nonstop. If you were drinking nonstop, you probably wouldn't be here listening to this podcast. And if you're not drinking nonstop, it means that you know how to not drink. You are capable of not drinking. And again, I'm making some assumptions here, but if you tally up how many hours per day you spend drinking versus how many hours you're not drinking, I bet you clock in a good number of non-drinking hours, don't you? This is really important to notice, because most of us who get to a point where our drinking is a problem, we have stories like, I'm out of control around alcohol, or once I start, I can't stop, or I just can't seem to stay away from it, and so on. And these stories sound true, and I'm sure you can come up with specific examples from the past where they were true. Days when you couldn't resist the temptation, or when you had good intentions before you poured the first drink, but then the night went off the rails anyway. I can fill a book with examples like that too, where I felt out of control and unable to stop. But these stories are lies, and I want you to start seeing that. Again, notice that you're not drinking 24/7. And even if there are moments when you drink until you pass out, and I won't lie, I've been there as well. I have definitely had my fair share of times when I have passed out drinking. But even if there are days when that happens, notice that there are also days when you do eventually stop drinking and call it a night. Even if it's a few drinks later than you originally intended, that moment still comes when you say, that's enough, and you stop. Which means that you can say no. You have it within you to say no. And this reinforces another point as well, that drinking doesn't just happen to you. It's always a choice that you make. Even if it sometimes seems like it's happening too fast and the drink is in your hand before you've even decided to drink, that's not true. The drink doesn't just land in your hand, and the alcohol doesn't jump from the glass into your mouth. There's always a moment when your brain makes a choice. It always starts with a thought, and that thought causes you to then take the action of drinking. So, we've established you're capable of saying no. So far, so good. Now, let's come back to the idea of how hard it is to say no. Again, notice if your brain is really attached to telling you that it's so hard not to drink. And again, I want you to think of all the times when you're not drinking and how sometimes alcohol really is actually the furthest thing from your mind. So, in vacuum, on its own, the choice not to drink is not hard. You make this choice all the time, as we've already established. Where it gets hard is that in certain situations, the alcohol stands in for something we really want, and that's when it becomes trickier to say no. For some people, alcohol is a reward at the end of a long day, juggling work, kids, dinner, pets, and various household tasks. It can feel like that drink at the end of the night is the only thing they have to look forward to, the one pleasant moment after a day of running around catering to other people's needs. For other people, alcohol is how they fit in with their friends, or how they join in the fun, how they get over social anxiety and loosen up to be able to have honest conversations and laugh and share stories. Or maybe alcohol offers an escape from unpleasant emotions, a way to temporarily shield yourself from a crisis unfolding in your personal life, or to shut down the chatter in your brain that reminds you of everything you didn't get done or the million things you have to do tomorrow. And some people turn to alcohol for pain relief, or as a way to help them fall asleep, or to tap into inspiration when they're creating art, and for many other reasons. I don't need to tell you that alcohol can serve many different purposes. And it's in those situations, when we turn to alcohol to solve a problem, that it becomes more challenging to say no. Let's say you've gotten into the habit of pouring a glass of wine as soon as you get home as a way to help you unwind from work before you start making dinner. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, of course. What a normal thing to want to take off the edge a little bit as you transition from one demanding part of your day to another. But here's what happens. The more you repeat that pattern of pouring a glass of wine the minute you get home, because you're telling yourself that it's going to help you to relax, the more your brain learns to expect the glass of wine. Your brain starts to learn that wine equals relaxation. Every time you make a beeline for the fridge, the minute you get home and you pour a glass of wine, you reinforce that message until eventually, and here's the kicker, not only does your brain learn that alcohol equals relaxation, but at some point, if you repeat that pattern enough times, your brain learns that alcohol is the only way to relax. This is really important, so I'm going to say it again. If you keep using alcohol as a solution to a problem, whether the problem is you're trying to relax or you're trying to turn off your inner critic or to feel more at ease or to fall asleep, at some point, your brain learns that alcohol is the only solution to that problem. Because you've repeated that behavior so many times, your brain has created a shortcut. Those neural pathways are now wired together, which means that the desire for alcohol has become hardwired to that trigger. So let's say at some point you decide to take a break from drinking or to cut back. You decide that you're going to skip that glass of wine before dinner. You have good intentions, you've made a choice, you like your reasons for wanting to drink less, you're ready. But then you walk in from work the next day and you realize you have an overwhelming desire for a drink. Despite your good intentions and your resolve, all you can think about is that glass of wine. You feel restless and fidgety without it, and you don't know what to do with yourself. You don't understand what's happening. Why do you still want the drink, even though you decided you're going to not drink. Did your brain not get the memo? If this has ever happened to you, you're not broken. You're not weak. It's not a question of not having enough willpower. This is just your brain acting the way that human brains have evolved to act. Because you repeated the pattern so many times, your brain started to run that pattern on autopilot. That's why you find yourself craving a drink. Because you've programmed your brain to want a drink when you walk into the kitchen at 6 p.m. on a workday. And you can substitute your own example here. If you think that alcohol helps you to connect with your partner, and you and your partner repeatedly and routinely drink together, at some point your brain will learn that alcohol is the only thing that allows you to connect with your partner. So if you try to do dry January, let's say, your brain will freak out and tell you that you will feel hopelessly disconnected from your partner if you're not sharing a drink. Say you're dealing with a family crisis and you've been using alcohol to numb yourself to difficult emotions. What happens is that over time, you erode your own emotional resilience because you teach your brain that how you manage uncomfortable emotions is by drinking. And what is more, that drinking is the only recourse against uncomfortable emotions. This is where it gets hard to say no to alcohol. When you've used alcohol as a solution to a problem, and I put solution in quotation marks here, but when you've used alcohol as a solution to a problem and your brain has, understandably, come to see alcohol as the only solution. And this is where I come back to my thesis from earlier, that choosing not to drink is the easier part of this equation. The harder part is to deal with the discomfort that's inherent in breaking the pattern that you've taught your brain. So let's come back to the example of having a glass of wine before dinner. If you decide you want to change your drinking habits, this is what you're up against. You have to learn to tolerate the discomfort of getting through that witching hour without your usual coping tool. And yes, it's going to be uncomfortable. There are, of course, tools you can use to lessen that discomfort, and I teach my clients a number of quick practical techniques for knocking down the intensity of any emotion or any craving. But there's no way around it, really. You will have to learn to be uncomfortable. And in the process, you're actually building some incredible emotional skills. Things like impulse control, emotional regulation, self-trust, resilience, and you're getting better at delayed gratification. These are skills that will serve you in every area of your life, not just when it comes to alcohol. So, how do you get comfortable with discomfort? I'm so glad you asked. Because, as it turns out, every single one of you listening is already a pro at discomfort. I guarantee you this is true. I don't know a single person who has or has had a problematic relationship with drinking that isn't used to dealing with discomfort on a daily basis. Think about it. Your current drinking habits are uncomfortable. There's the physical discomfort to start with. I, for one, used to wake up with a hangover every day. For years, I was having at least a couple of drinks every night, so even if I wasn't going to bed completely drunk, there was still a good few units of alcohol in my system every single night, which meant that in the morning I woke up exhausted, dehydrated, and frequently with a low-grade headache, if not worse. There was also the shame and regret of making promises to myself that I couldn't keep, about cutting back, about stopping at one, about not drinking every single night. And because I couldn't do that, I felt out of control and weak. I was also constantly worried if other people had noticed how much I was drinking. Were they noticing how quickly I was emptying my glass? What if someone found out that I often continued drinking by myself after I got home from the pub? It would have been so mortifying if one of my friends confronted me about my consumption. And I was worried about embarrassing myself in public or doing something I would later regret. And I do not wish upon anyone the anxiety of looking through your phone the morning after a heavy night of drinking, not remembering who you called or texted. And underneath all of this, there was also a constant hum of self-hatred. I really did hate myself. I was so disappointed in the person I'd become, and I could not understand how I had let my life become such a mess. I was my own worst judge, letting myself down and then punishing myself for letting myself down, and feeling so horrible about myself that the only thing that helped was to drink. So that was my situation. And for better or worse, I lived alone during the years of my heaviest drinking. So for the most part, my worst moments thankfully happened without a witness. But of course, that's not the case for everyone. And in addition to the examples I've shared from my own experience, there's so much more we can add to this list, like letting down friends and family, picking fights with loved ones, seeing the disappointment in your kids' eyes when you've promised them to do something fun on Saturday, but you're too hungover and you can't take them, or getting caught sneaking alcohol, or driving drunk, spending more money than you intended to, falling or breaking things and physically hurting yourself or other people, and losing more of your self-respect and self-trust every single day. Does any of that sound comfortable to you? Does any of that sound like blissful, carefree existence? No, of course not. And yet, when we think about cutting back on drinking and we think about the potential discomfort of giving up alcohol, we seem to develop temporary amnesia about the reality of our current lives, and we act as if cutting back would require us to give up a life of absolute bliss. We agonize over the potential discomfort of celebrating a friend's birthday without ordering a cocktail, or going out to a fancy dinner and skipping the wine. We're terrified of how we will handle a stressful situation at work without the easy buffer of alcohol after. And I'm not going to lie to you. It will be uncomfortable when you try to learn how to do things without alcohol that you've previously only done while you were drinking. You will be annoyed, anxious, lonely, bored, angry, frustrated, afraid. And it might be quite a challenge to learn how to sit with those emotions, especially if you, like me, had been used to applying alcohol at the first sign of any emotion. It's going to be a steep learning curve, and it's unlikely that you're going to love this kind of lesson. But again, here's the part I don't want you to miss. You are already good at being uncomfortable. You're uncomfortable now, every day. You've been carrying the shame, regret, and anxiety of your drinking habits for years. The hangovers, the sneaking around, the lies, the broken promises, the arguments, the tears, the dread, the despair. That's what you're already living with. You are already uncomfortable now. Changing your drinking habits simply requires that you trade one kind of discomfort for another. So, if you're going to be uncomfortable either way, what flavor of discomfort do you want to choose? One keeps you stuck where you are. The other helps you to become the person you want to be. One reinforces the habit and the old patterns that got you here in the first place. And the other helps you to free yourself for good. I'm really glad that 5 years ago, I chose to lean into the discomfort that moved me forward and to get my drinking under control and to sort my life out. Learning how to be uncomfortable is not only a requirement for sustainable habit change, but it actually is a superpower, I've come to realize. Because here's the thing, when you learn to accept discomfort, or even to welcome it because you know that discomfort helps you to grow, that skill doesn't just apply to changing your drinking habits. Even though that's our focus here, when you come to appreciate that discomfort is not a scary place to be in, and when you realize you have everything you need to weather the discomfort and come out on the other side, a lot of other things in your life become possible too. You show up differently to the whole world. Not much scares you, so there is very little that you won't do. And that, my friends, that's what freedom looks like. So that's what I'll leave you with. Start noticing that you're already saying no to alcohol many, many times every day, which means you're perfectly capable of saying no. And start noticing what discomfort you're trying to avoid by drinking and lean into that. Because you're already living with all kinds of discomfort all the time that stem from your current drinking patterns. And when you realize that quitting drinking isn't about trading a life of peaceful happiness for a life of discomfort, but you're just swapping one type of discomfort for another, then it becomes a lot easier to choose the discomfort that helps you to become the person you want to be. If this episode hit home and you're thinking, yes, I want to do this, but I don't know how, I can help you. This is the work that I do with my clients every day. We will uncover the role that alcohol is playing in your life, and I'll help you retrain your brain to respond differently to triggers and build the emotional resilience you need in order to feel calm, confident, and in control without a drink in your hand. If you're ready to break your dependence on alcohol as your emotional regulation tool and to feel proud of your choices again, I would love to help you. I offer free consultations, no strings attached, and you can book yours via the link in the show notes. Take good care, my friends, and I'll talk to you next week. If you're looking for practical advice for how to say no to alcohol and say yes to yourself, you will want to get on my email list. Sign up to receive my free guide with 7 steps to kickstart your sobriety. The link is in the show notes, so go and grab it now, and I'll see you soon in your inbox.